One compromised account, no secondary approval, 200,000 devices wiped across 79 countries. New Zealand set its cybersecurity floor 8 weeks before that happened. The question now is whether your organization is above it. Here is what the floor actually requires. The NCSC minimum cybersecurity standards define CMM2 as the minimum, not the target, the floor. And CMM2 is not a technology gap. It is a governance gap. Your MFA policy can exist and still be at CMM1 if it lives in someone's head. The Stryker attack needed 3 things to go wrong. No phishing-resistant MFA, no scoped admin access, no bulk wipe alert threshold. All 3 are MCSS standards. None required new technology. The 30th of April deadline has passed. The floor is now in effect. What does your organization's...
Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Hamberger Report. Zero Trust, Thursday. I'm Andreas Hamberger. This is Chapter 8, the October 2025 Standards. New Zealand published its minimum cybersecurity standards on 30th October 2025. They took effect that day. The first reporting period closed 30th April 2026. If your self-assessment isn't done, you're not waiting for a deadline. You're already in the first assessment cycle. The standards sit between 2 other frameworks. The NZISM is the building code, every clause, every requirement, thoroughly specified. The MCSS is the occupancy certificate, the minimum evidence that the building is safe to use. You can know every clause of the building code and still fail the inspection because no one documented whether the work was done, tested, whether it operates as intended, or scheduled when it will be reviewed. That is the CMM1 to CMM2 gap. It is where most organizations live. 10 standards across 5 framework functions: identify and understand, prevent and protect, detect and contain, respond and recover, and guide and govern. The dependency structure is designed. You cannot protect what you haven't identified. You cannot detect what you haven't instrumented. Standards 1, 2, and 3 form the prerequisite layer. Standards 4, 5, 6, and 8 form the protection layer. Standard 7, detect unusual behavior, is where the assume breach principle reaches its operational implementation. Detection is not a backup plan. It is the acknowledgement that breach is inevitable and that detection is the mitigation. For agentic workloads, that monitoring requirement extends to non-human actors. Every tool call, every data access, every external request, a human who authenticates and goes idle, triggers a session timeout. An agent that authenticates and executes 10,000 API calls over the same window is operationally invisible without instrumentation. CMM2 does not require more sophisticated technology than CMM1. It requires that what you are already doing is written down, assigned to an owner, scheduled for review, and recorded as complete. If your MFA policy exists but lives in someone's head, you are at CMM1. If it is documented, applied to all privileged accounts, and has a review date in the calendar, you are at CMM2. The controls are the same, the governance discipline is the difference. For each of the 10 standards, the maturity question is consistent. Can you demonstrate that this control is planned, scheduled, assigned to an owner, and that its operation is tracked? The PSR self-assessment tool includes the MCSS questionnaire as a dedicated tab with results rendered as a radar diagram across all 10 standards and all CSCMM levels. Running that assessment gives you a visual gap analysis. The agencies that struggle are those that haven't run it yet. The events of 11th March 2026 demonstrate why standards 6, 7, and 8 exist as a minimum floor. At Stryker, one admin account could issue wipe commands to every enrolled device with no secondary approval, no phishing-resistant authentication, no alert threshold for bulk operations, no scoped time-limited access. Standard 6, multi-factor authentication. CISA specifically recommended phishing-resistant MFA FIDO2 hardware keys for all MDM admin accounts. Push notification MFA does not defend against adversary-in-the-middle phishing. FIDO2 defeats this because the credential is cryptographically bound to the specific domain. Standard 8 least privilege. The Stryker account held standing global administrator privileges with enterprise-wide wipe authority and no just-in-time activation. Standard 7 detect unusual behavior. an alert threshold for any wipe of more than 3 to 5 devices in a short window would have been an early indicator. None of these failures required sophisticated technology to prevent. They required CMM2 governance, documented policies, assigned access scopes, configured thresholds, tested response capability. Government agencies with agentic workloads face an additional dimension. AI agents authenticate to services with credentials that, in most current deployments, carry broader scope than any individual human user. An agent that can read data, call external APIs, and execute actions is by architecture a credential with elevated privilege. The lethal trifecta from Chapter 5 applies precisely here: data access, exposure to untrusted content, and external communication capability create an insider threat posture by design. Standard 8 requires this be addressed. Standard 6 requires that agent authentication be as rigorously enforced as the human users. Standard 7 requires that the agent's operation be visible. NZDISM version 3.9 provides the authentication and monitoring controls. The MCSS requires those controls operate at CMM2 level, documented, assigned, scheduled, and recorded. Both documents point in the same direction. For agentic deployments, the compliance obligation is not theoretical. It is operational from day one of deployment. The MCSS directly mandates GCISO designated agencies. Its reach extends further. At the National Cybersecurity Summit on 17 March 2026, Privacy Commissioner Michael Webster stated that the MCSC minimum cybersecurity standards are being used as a defensible baseline for assessing whether organizations have taken reasonable steps to protect personal information under the Privacy Act 2020. Section 11 of the Privacy Act 2020 requires agencies to take reasonable steps to protect personal information. The Commissioner's statement positions the MCSC within that assessment. An organization that cannot demonstrate compliance at CMM2 level faces a harder path to establishing it. Took reasonable steps in the event of a breach. From 1 May 2026, Information Privacy Principle 3A is in force. The obligation to track data provenance and notify individuals when their personal information is collected from third parties. The MCSS and IPP3A together create a layered compliance requirement. Zero Trust architecture addresses both simultaneously. Strong identity and access controls satisfy the MCSS protection standards. Data provenance tracking and policy enforcement points address the IPP3A notification requirement. On 27 February 2026, the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet published both the New Zealand Cybersecurity Strategy 2026 to 2030 and a discussion document proposing a critical infrastructure security regime. The consultation closed 19 April 2026. The proposed regime references minimum cyber risk management programs for critical infrastructure operators. The discussion document proposes direct criminal liability of up to $500,000 for operators that fail to maintain minimum cybersecurity standards following a significant breach. MFA least privilege and detecting unusual behavior are no longer abstract governance controls. For organizations in sectors likely to be classified as critical infrastructure, they become the documented evidence that a director exercised reasonable care. The MCSS is the logical starting point for building that evidence base. If you are already building for Zero Trust architecture, you are already addressing 7 of the 10 standards as a side effect of the architecture: asset inventory, secure configuration, patching, MFA, detecting unusual behavior, least privilege, and data recovery. The 3 remaining standards, risk management, security awareness, and response planning, require program-level work the architecture won't do for you. Begin with standards 3, 6, and 8. Asset inventory, MFA, and least privilege. These are the 3 controls whose absence enabled the Stryker outcome. The floor is set. The question is what you build on it. That is the Hamberger report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.
Like and subscribe.